All right. Well, hello and welcome to Stress Management from the Student Success presentations. My name is Tyler Fisher. I'm the director of the Leadership Center here at TCU. Happy to be talking to you about the topic of stress and stress management. All right, so just a quick background. I've been at TCU for about 10 years right now in one fashion or the other. I started my time here in the athletic department working in strength and conditioning and have transitioned into the Leadership Center and enjoyed the last 6 years in that capacity. Just want to give y'all a couple quick things on the night. Please try to stay as engaged as possible in this. We'll use the chat function a couple different times. Really feel free to ask questions, whether that's through audio or through the chat. We want to make this as interactive as possible. Ultimately, at the end of this, I don't just want to give you information, but I want to give you some actual tangible skills or ways that you can potentially manage the stress in your life in a little bit better capacity. So as I do in pretty much every session, I'm going to go ahead and ask the question, what's good today? I ask that question as a non-rhetorical greeting because I think it helps to frame your mind in one that is much more positive and one that is more focused on the good that is going on. So quick background, I know a few of you as I scroll through the participants have probably heard this before, but share it with those who haven't. The reason I say what's good today instead of what's up, instead of how's it going, has everything to do with one of my first jobs out of undergrad, right? In this job, I had the distinct pleasure of working with an individual who was ultra negative. I mean, this man was an absolute emotional vampire who would suck the life out of you at the drop of a hat. And the way he would go about doing this is every single day I'd walk into work or he'd walk into work and there'd be this exchanging greetings. And I would say, what's up? I would say, how's it going? And he would go into this endless rant of just this sucks, that sucks, here's everything that's terrible in life, right? And he would do that without fail. So one day I had enough of my own worry, anxiety, and stress that I couldn't take it, right? And so I'm literally pacing back and forth. And as this guy is walking in, I'm thinking, how am I going to do this today? So instead of saying what's up, instead of saying how's it going that day though, I said, hey man, what's good? And I kind of realized what I said as it came out of my mouth. And he was about to go into this rant. I said, no, man. I said, hey, what's good? Yeah, what's good today? He kind of paused and took a step back and looked at me kind of funny. I said, yeah, tell me something good. And so he did. And we chatted on that for a couple minutes. I said, awesome. I said, what else is good? You know, we kind of continued that conversation. I said, no, we got this and this going on today. I said, how can we make sure today is good? And that completely flipped the dynamic of our relationship, right? No longer was it built on this unstable foundation of negativity, but it was built on some stability that encompassed positivity. So that was long before I was ever involved in leadership development, but it helped me to understand and connect the power of positivity and the power of a positive mindset going into really anything that you're involved in. And so hopefully for a quick second, y'all can think of something in your life in the past 24 hours or the next 24 hours that for you is specifically good. And then we'll get into the stress. All right, so stress. A lot of times in college, it feels like it's always happening, right? Well, it feels like that after college as well, but especially during this time, especially during the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic, a short abbreviated semester, everything is kind of crammed together. Life is full. So in the chat, I would love for you to just tell me, are you living with a significant amount of stress? Yes, no, or moderate. So if everyone could go ahead and type that in, just a yes, no, or moderate, that helps give me a feel for where everybody's at here.
I would say moderate.
Moderate, okay. I love it. A lot, moderate, yeehaw, for sure. Awesome. So yeah, it looks like, for the most part, we have a few that are moderate, but a lot of people are living with a lot of stress, right? So, how do we manage? How do we handle that, right? So the American Medical Association defines stress as any interference that disturbs a person's mental or physical well-being. And that word interference is going to come into play later on as we talk about some ways to alleviate or remove it from life. But I think that's just a good way to kind of think about it, right? it's an interference. It disturbs our overall well-being, and that's not usually enjoyable. So what do you think of as stress? If you can give me key words, phrases, concepts, thoughts, just anything that you think of as stress, and go ahead and put that in the chat for me. Chemistry, homework, too much going on, school, overwhelmed. Awesome, keep them coming.
I would say being like worried about other stuff.
Okay. Yeah, we have a couple, we have at least one in the room here. School, homework, being overwhelmed, finance, family. Yeah, a lot of things going on, right? Time. Nice. 6th grade virtual learning. Yeah. Right. Excellent. Right. That's a lot of what I feel like we usually talk about when we think of stress, right? It's that grind that wears us down. It's the burden that we carry around. It's all of those things kind of encompassed together. It just really, on a lot of days, wear you out. Excuse me. But the truth of the matter is there's actually two different kinds of stress. So first and foremost, you have eustress, which is actually a positive stress, right? If this idea of positive stress is a little bit new, you're not necessarily alone. You know, most equate stress with negative experience. I don't think we rarely or ever think of stress as a positive thing, but eustress is just that. It is positive stress. It's the excitement that comes along with somewhat stressful events. It's that chemical response in the body that kind of preps you to get ready for something new, something challenging, and kind of in an uplifting way, right? Without eustress, we wouldn't be able to handle distress that is in our life. And that's the second one. And distress is simply the opposite of eustress. Distress can really make you feel more overwhelmed because your resources, you know, physically, mentally, and emotionally, are just not able to meet the demands that you're facing. And this type of negative stress can lead to anxiety, depression, decreased performance, and a whole host of other things that I'm sure many of you have felt or talked about in different times in your life, right? So now let's talk a little bit about what does it mean as we think of stress management, right? And so there's a few things to touch on with the fact that we want to stress manage. And the first one is reframe, right? So in reframing this, Kelly McGonigal has an excellent TED Talk with over 24 million views on it, in which she talks about stress is just the response our body has to the challenge that's in front of us. And if we can reframe and think about stress as being a positive, oftentimes we will be able to do that. We'll be able to shift it into that positive energy that allows us to overcome or accomplish what's before us. The next thing is reactive. So reactive strategies are things we can do when we experience stress to reduce some of the negative consequences that really prepare us for creative problem solving. But it's our response after the fact. And then we have proactive, right? Proactive are those things that we try to do before we experience stress. They're the things that we do to build up our resilience. They're all the things that people associate with more kind of a holistic well-being at various times, right? Some of those things, both proactive and reactive, are in this image here. But I'm curious, so there are 42 of you on Zoom here currently. I would love to see at least 42 different answers in the chat. So what are ways that you currently manage or have heard of to manage stress? I want to see the most comprehensive list we can create here.
Naps.
So if you're in the room here, naps, planning, exercise, walks, excellent, keep them coming. Relaxing, take breaks, painting, I like, massage, time management, working out, talking to family, going outside, spending time with friends, therapy, absolutely, working out. There we go, exercise, Bible studies, involvement programs, organizations that make you happy. Take a breather, yeah, absolutely. So talk to others. Yeah, keep them coming if there's others that you have. Just reframing and knowing that these things could disappear in a single second. All right. So I think most people know all the ways in which you can proactively or reactively manage stress, right? Those aren't things that are new, those aren't things that are novel, they're things that you hear about, you talk about yourself, and hear on a regular basis. I think the tricky component of it, though, has a lot more to do. So yeah, put those in there. The tricky thing really is encompassed in what we're going to talk about next, actually managing your stress. So everybody just listed the what, right? What can you do to manage your stress? What can you do proactively? What can you do reactively? Maybe some of those things were daily, weekly, monthly, any number of those things, right? But they were all those things that are encompassed in what you can do. Those are important. You have to know what you're going to do to manage your stress. But then I think the next step is to know why. Why is that, in fact, something that works for you? Why would you choose that over something else? So to give a couple examples, from a physical standpoint, if the what you were going to do was yoga, well, why is that something that works for you? I think oftentimes the why connects into, well, after doing yoga, I feel centered, grounded, a little bit physically pushed. It's just those endorphins that come along with that, right? I feel in a more relaxed state, mentally, physically, emotionally, and it just helps to center and balance me. So that's the what is yoga, the why is all of those things. Another example would be for maybe time management. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to have a planner, right? I'm going to take this planner and I'm going to list out everything that I have every day. So I have this great schedule, a great calendar of events, and it's just nice and in front of me. And the why might be, well, because I'm a visual person, right? I like to be able to see what's going on. I like to be able to check things off my list. I like to know what's coming next. I like to follow that flow chart or just the flow of the day, right? So that's why. Now, the tricky side of those, I think, becomes in the how. And that's a lot of times where we get caught up and where things kind of go awry. So if we're going to go back and we're going to say, you know, in each of those examples, what are we going to do? Why are we going to do it? And then how? Well, if we're talking yoga, if we're talking that centers and balances us, that just kind of brings that holistic state of physical, mental, and emotional wellness to us. Well, now the question is, well, how, right? And so maybe the how, as I had explained to me, someone kind of, I drew this out of them through a lot of questions about that. And the how was that, well, I guess I could go and try to get one free class at, you know, a handful of different yoga studios that are close to campus. I was like, okay, tell me a little bit more about how. And it's like, okay, well, then if I go get those, I figure out which studio works for me, I figure out which instructors, kind of which class, then I can figure out what times those are offered, and I can put those into my schedule in such a way that it allows me to do it 2 days a week, and there I have some built-in stress management, right? But that how and the nuance or context associated with it is important to work through if you're actually going to actionize that. So again, same thing for the example of creating a planner, right? It gives you that organized list, you can just follow it in the flow. And maybe for that, it looks a little bit like, well, at the beginning of the semester, when I get my syllabus, for each class, I'm going to go through and I'm going to write in when I have every single test, or paper or quiz, everything that's due and when it's due. I'm going to get all those laid out so I have that detail, right? And then every Sunday afternoon, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to update any changes or any plans that I have for the week. Maybe even 1 week before I see every test, I'm going to put a note in there in the planner, be like, start studying for this test, and then block out those times. But as I'm going to update that and change that and shift that every Sunday so that my week is set, my week is managed, right? So that how, again, is a critically important part that then allows you to follow this step-by-step process and get that done, hopefully, with a limited or lesser amount of stress, right? So, questions, comments, concerns so far about this concept of what, why, and specifically the how? Right. Again, I think most of the time, most people know what they want to do, and they often know why they want to do it, but the how gets to be a little tricky. And that's where you get kind of that artistic licensing or ownership over how you choose to live your life and how you choose to put that puzzle together in the best way possible for you. Yeah, the strategic planning element, right? It just really allows that freedom for you to follow and really front load that process in a way that creates freedom throughout the course of the week. But again, sometimes that's a little bit harder to plan and map out, and sometimes things get in the way. So in that American Medical Association definition, one of the things it said stress is an interference, right? So let's talk about this concept of performance and interference, and then put stress together in removing interferences all in one nice little package here, right? So performance equals potential minus interference. So this is a great equation from a renowned psychologist named Tim Galloway, right? And so basically this concept is, in order to get your performance to equal your potential, you have to remove all interferences. And most of those interferences, in some form or fashion, have stress or are stress associated with it, right? So if you want to maximize your performance, if you want to be a high-performing individual, you have to identify those areas, those things in life that are interfering with your performance, whether that is academically, whether that's personally, whether that's at work, any segment of life, right? You have to identify what is interfering with you being your best. And that's not always easy. That takes a little bit of time. But in doing that, it can help you identify and really narrow down what are kind of the root causes of these interferences. How is that negatively impacting me? How can I remove it so that I can elevate my performance and more closely reach my potential? Right? Questions or comments about this whole concept of performance equals potential minus interference? All right. So, let's see if I can find this part of the thought here. So hopefully everyone can see all of this now. And so what I want you to do is, you're more than welcome to take a screenshot of this, picture, write it down on your own individual piece of paper. But here's the challenge, right? If you want to remove interferences and reduce stress, we can walk through these different categories, right? And on the side here, I put whether it's personal, work, or your involvement in an organization, or academics, stress is going to occur everywhere. And so how you manage it, how you alleviate it, and how you work through it ultimately impacts how you perform. And obviously, if you got to TCU, you've no doubt been high performing in the past, you're no doubt top notch in so many different ways. But how can we keep you at that and then help elevate you a little bit more through the removal of some of these interferences? And so the first thing to keep in mind as we walk through this is, what is your goal, or what is the stressor you want to remove? Right? What does that ultimately look like? So maybe with academics, that comes down to the fact that it's like, well, my goal is to walk into tests and not be nervous. And not be a little bit nervous, but not be in this state of just pure stress and nervousness and concern about how I'm going to perform on the test that's upcoming, right? So that may be the goal. Your current reality, well, maybe that current reality is you currently walk into the test and you instantly feel stressed, right? Your heart rate elevates, maybe sweating, maybe nervousness, maybe shakiness. Like, how are all those things encompassed in that current reality? So then you got to think a little bit. It's like, what opportunities are needed to remove that stressor? Well, let's see. If I'm nervous going into the test, my goal is to be not nervous anymore. I guess the opportunity would maybe be to feel a little bit more prepared, or in fact, take more time in preparing for each upcoming test. So then you got to think, so what interference is preventing you from removing that stressor? Like, okay, well, maybe I'm preparing in the wrong way, but that's the way I've always done it. So just kind of the status quo is an interference that's causing me to not remove that stressor. So maybe I have to think a little bit differently. Maybe I have to think through my study habits, as in cramming all night the night before maybe isn't the best route. Maybe I need to set small chunks of time in the week leading up to the test to study 60 minutes here, 90 minutes there. Maybe I need to utilize the Pomodoro Technique, which is 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, giving yourself intense sessions of study, taking a short little 5-minute break in there. And so that interference, that's preventing you from removing the stressor, maybe it's just that you don't know a better way. So maybe you have to search for that. And so then what are you willing to do to overcome that interference? And that's where it gets into talking to peers, talking to professors, staff, anyone that can kind of help you with that, figure out what is a better way to study, what is a better way to move forward within that. And so then, as you walk through that, now you have your goal or the stressor that you want to remove. You've identified your current reality. You've identified what opportunities you need to remove that stressor. You've identified what's preventing you from currently doing that. And then you decide what are you actually willing to do. And when you get into that action-based component of what you're actually willing to do, that's when you can really see the results come, right? And you can walk through those for any particular area of life, right? Academics, work, organization, personal. So let's go for a minute in the chat, or just if you want to shout it out, audio. Like, what questions do you have about this, or how can we help you maybe more refine what is the actual stressor? Or if anybody has a stressor and they kind of want to walk through it back and forth, or to share an example, we can definitely do that. All right. So just some important things to kind of keep in mind. I think some of the easiest and most helpful ways to start this process of removing stress are to figure out what does your schedule look like? What are those big non-negotiable priorities that you have in there? So class, meals, sleep, nutrition, all of those things. How do you start with those, getting in on your schedule, and then build everything else around that? And so I think the more that you can do that, the more likely you are to see that success come in a little bit quicker fashion. So yeah, we have 2 in the chat here. So managing multiple projects at once, keeping up with school. Yeah, do y'all want to try to graduate in December during the pandemic? Yeah. So I think one of the interesting things to think about with those that are particularly mentioned here is which one of those do you control? Like, what control do you have over some components of that, and how can you better identify it? So if we're saying keeping up with school, we'll take this one as an example. So the stress is just kind of the overwhelming nature of how school is coming in. It's coming in at such a rapid rate that we're not really able to kind of process it. So that's more of the current reality. And the goal side of that would be to be able to go from maybe one thing to the next in a smooth and fluid fashion, and in doing so, be high performing, but not stretched to the absolute max, right? And so maybe the opportunity you need for that is just simply a little bit more time, right? And so the interference that's preventing you from removing that stressor is the fact that you feel like you don't have any time, because every ounce of your day is filled to the max, right? So the challenge in that, and maybe what you're willing to do to overcome that interference, could look a little something like this. So everything's coming, it's like you're just not able to handle the speed of everything. It's, the floodgates have just, in essence, opened up. So at some point in time, you have to take a step back, you have to pause, and you have to give yourself time to take a breath and time to plan. And so maybe the week feels like there's so much jammed into it that there's just not time. So can you challenge yourself to get to the end of the week, and maybe, as long as you get enough sleep, can you challenge yourself to wake up maybe 2 hours earlier than you normally would on Saturday, and sit down in the morning, get some food, and when it's quiet and you have that space, really intentionally plan out what does your schedule look like. Can you get that planner, can you put all those things on your calendar, and start to see them in the physical presence of what does this look like before you. And then in doing that, you start to add other little details in. It's like, okay, well, I know this test is here, this one's here, this one's here. So that means I need to study a little bit here, here, here for this one, and over here for this one. Okay, I also have to work, or I also have to, I'm a part of this organization, and these are those responsibilities. And it's really just taking all of those components and figuring out what are those non-negotiable time slots, what are those different areas that must happen, that must get things done, and then kind of putting everything else around, right? But also when you do that, how can you challenge yourself to build in little breaks, whether that's 5 to 15 minutes, or it's actually longer, right? How can you take those breaks? How can you make sure that you recharge, you refresh? And on that plan, how do you make sure that you put in all your meals as well, right? All those opportunities to go work out or go for a walk. And then as you start to put that puzzle together, maybe you kind of got to scrap the first draft, and you're like, no, that wasn't exactly right. You got to go at it again. But the more times you take that puzzle apart and put it back together, ultimately, the more it's going to look like what it is, a rewarding and fulfilling life. So I don't know if that's helpful, if that's kind of what you're looking for, but hopefully that gives you a little bit more to work with. What other questions or comments are on your mind as a result of figuring out that process of how, and then maybe in these particular categories? What areas of life do you feel like cause the most stress? Mental, physical, emotional, any of those? Which ones are causing y'all the most stress? And then maybe we can troubleshoot a little bit on that. School and family. Okay. So I'm seeing a lot of school, every time I turn, better keep up. Seeing a lot of these things, with the academic side of it, I really think that sitting down and putting that planner together and planning everything in advance is really key. I mean, this is an abbreviated semester where everything is just kind of jam-packed and crammed into doing everything in that short amount of time. Reading some more of these. But I think in amongst that, I think one of the things that I'm seeing as we come out of this, and it's maybe more connected to the emotional side of it, is that concept of self-care, giving yourself some grace, giving yourself a little bit of time and space to just make sure that your wellness is taken care of. And when you do that, there's nothing selfish about that, because you can't be your most high-performing if you're not taking care of yourself, right? And that poses a challenge. I particularly think it poses a challenge when a lot of times we live in a comparison culture, right? Well, this person is handling all of this, and this person's doing that, or they have this, or they have that. And a lot of times it feels like, well, I should too, right? That's not necessarily the case. The reality is you can only control yourself. You can only be as high performing as you're able to be. And in doing that, you have to remove as many interferences as you can. So productivity often is able to increase as you take better care of yourself, right? As you're able to get close to 8 hours of sleep a night, as you're able to make sure that you eat 3 meals a day, as you're able to find those times, even just little quick windows of opportunity to do things that bring you joy on a daily basis. And I know there's immense challenge around that right now. I experience it, coworkers, family, friends, we've all talked about how that is a big challenge right now. So nobody's necessarily immune to it. But the challenge is really to take a step back and to just look at things and figure out, okay, what's most important here, right? And a lot of times you have to be most important. You have to prioritize yourself, your self-care, your mental and physical well-being. And a lot of that is eliminating stressors. And some things in life certainly are non-negotiable, right? but what is negotiable? And what are you willing to give up or cut down, or kind of put into a slightly different place in life so that you can still live in that rewarding and fulfilling way? But, you know, the joy needs to be there, the self-care needs to be there. Otherwise, that performance just continually drops. What specific questions can I answer for anybody? Fair enough, nothing at the moment. So here's the interesting thing, right? That action has to occur. There we go. That's a good question. Any tips for sticking to your schedule? Feel like you're distracted super easy. Yeah. So sometimes currently it is a challenge to figure out what is the physical space you need to be in to be most productive. Sometimes, and maybe right now, there's a little bit less control over what those spaces look like. But one of the things that I mentioned a little bit earlier was the Pomodoro Technique. And so the Pomodoro Technique it's just this, Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, right? And the whole concept is, over the course of 30 minutes, you work for 25, you take a 5-minute break, come back and you do it again. And whatever you're doing for those 25 minutes, everything else is completely blocked out. You can silence your phone, close down any other apps, shut your email off on your computer, and you're just focused on that studying, that reading, that paper, whatever it is for those 25 minutes, which is enough time to comprehend some good things, so it's enough time to really take in that information and synthesize it, and then you know you have a 5-minute break coming, right? And so then in that 5-minute break, can you get up, can you answer any texts or phone calls, can you check, maybe you have some emails come in that are urgent, you do that, but missing something for 25 minutes hopefully isn't enough that it's detrimental, right? And then you put everything back away, work for 25 minutes, take a 25-minute break. And I myself, as well as some students who have tried to adopt this over the course of the last couple of years, have found great success in it. So they're still able to take these, larger chunks of time, 2, 3, 4 hours, but then they just break that down even more into that Pomodoro technique, right? And they go 25 minutes, super intense, 5-minute break. So as far as the physical space and some of those other distractions, a lot of times when I was working at home this summer and some this fall, I'll put earplugs in so that I'm not hearing the excess noise of other family members or roommates or anything else that's going along. To kind of block out that, try to turn so that I'm looking at a wall, kind of maybe more of a blank wall, as opposed to where all the movement in the house is happening. Just changing locations on a somewhat regular basis too. This summer when I was using the Pomodoro method, I would go from the couch for 25 minutes, then to the table for 25 minutes, and then when it was nice enough weather, sometimes outside for 25 minutes. So breaking up the monotony by taking those little breaks in there, changing that environment, changing that scenery can be something that potentially helps you to stick to your schedule a little more. One of the other interesting things about that is I think that if you view those important things on your schedule as non-negotiable meetings, and you know that every non-negotiable is accounted for, then it has its time. And then everything else just kind of fits around it. So hopefully that makes it a little easier as well. What other questions are on y'all's mind? So, interesting question. So would trying to find time to talk with a friend be a stress factor? It could, depending upon what those conversations are going to be about. A lot of times friends can be something that help alleviate stress. But the funny thing is, so the guy I was mentioning in one of my first jobs who was ultra negative, it's caused me so much stress. Really outside of work, we were pretty good friends. And so sometimes that friend can cause you stress, sometimes they can alleviate stress. It's just figuring out what is the dynamic of that relationship. When do I need to lean on them? When do they need to lean on me? How do you make sure that there's a little bit of kind of give and take going on there? But hopefully, for the most part, friendships are things that are not causing any unnecessary stress. But definitely trying to figure out the time to manage friendships can. And so hopefully people are understandable right now with the fact that life is full and chaotic, and don't take offense to it, but hopefully it doesn't feel like you're just scheduling them in like any other appointment. So thanks for the question, Jack. Other questions related to stress in general or stress management? All right. So let's kind of wrap things up. I think I came across this kind of quote a few years ago, and I think it just really resonates with me, as I think leadership in general and all the components, including stress management, really have to have a strong action component to them, but there also has to be some intellectual side to that. And so the greatest weapon we have against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another and then act accordingly. And so the solution sounds like it might just be pretty simple a lot of times, but the execution of it is hard. And the execution of it takes repeated tries. It takes trying and failing, until eventually you just get better and better at it, and things start to flow, and things start to happen. Other questions, comments about stress, or anything I can share with y'all? Well, thank you all very much for being here. I'm happy to stick around for a couple minutes afterwards and talk through anything that y'all want. But y'all have a wonderful evening, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Hi, Tyler.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, I just popped in because I was curious. I got out of a junior league meeting and I was like, I'm going to pop in and see how many people. That's a good turnout.
Yeah, it really was.